a black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Don't be confused in this Ebonics debate and discussion about the words. That's the point I want to get to. See, vocabulary is a very small part of a language. And those of you who know me or who have known me for a long time know that if vocabulary meant that you understood a language, I would be speaking the most perfect French. I have a good vocabulary in French. In fact, I've had a vocabulary in French since high school. You ask me, Virgil A. Gaffin shaking her head because she has a good vocabulary in French. But I can't speak the language fluently. Even though I have a good vocabulary, I have to rely on Dr. Barr. I take him and say, Dr. Barr, read this for me. Explain this to me. But my vocabulary, just to give me a word, I can give you a lot of meanings for French words, but I can't speak the language fluently because language is more than vocabulary. It's the structure, the sound, the philosophy of the language. That's what you have to get into in order to understand a language. And so if we look at Ebonics, we see all these words that we think that we understand. We say, oh yeah, I understand that. Why is that guy saying this is a different language? I understand it, the English words. This is just bad English. No, it's not. Look at English itself. English is 80% made up of Latin words. Latin-based words make up English. They either came from vulgar Latin or they came out of French or something, Old French. So you got words like debilitate, words like feast, host, chapel, chauffeur. All of those are English. I mean, those words are out of Latin. But yet English is not a Romance language. It's not like Italian, Spanish, and French. It's considered what kind of language? A Germanic language. Why is it a Germanic language and not a Romance language when most of its words come out of the Romance language? It is a Germanic language rather than a Romance language because the sounds of English and the structure of English are more like Dutch and German than they are like French and Italian. So when you listen to Ebonics, you have to listen carefully. You're not hearing English. You're hearing something else. And that's why vocabulary is the least. When people tell you about languages, if a linguist would tell you, if you're talking about language, the least aspect of a language is its vocabulary. The main aspect is understanding the structure. What are the rules? How does this language operate? What's its philosophical worldview? How do people view different things? How do they count? How do they pronounce things? It's a different way. And what are the aspects of the language that are inherent in its history? Let me give you an example of what I mean by that, and then I'm round this out. See, in Ebonics, there are proverbs in Ebonics that are not in English, but they come out of the history. And when I was a young person growing up in Georgia and I was working in the cotton fields, and my uncle John Henry, he could carry 3 rows at the same time and pick cotton. He could pick 3 rows at the same time. I only picked 1. And he would see me struggling in a hot sun, and he would look over and he said, boy, you better learn how to work, or else work gonna work you. Now, that's not, I mean, that's an idiom of Ebonics. That's not an idiom of the English language. That's the idiom of my language. Comes from my people's history. Boy, trouble gonna fall, and when it fall, it ain't gonna fall on the ground, gonna fall on somebody. Those are idioms of the language. You see what I'm saying? That's a part of the lexicon. All languages have their own lexicons. Their lexicons come out of myths, come out of the legends of the people, come out of the histories of the people, you see. So the lexicon of Ebonics is rooted right in the history of the people. And that brings me to this point. I will never understand why so many African Americans got up and disparaged the language of their mothers and fathers. I'll never understand that. You can't make me understand that. There's no way in the world anyone else in this country or anywhere else in the world will ever stand up and speak against the language that brought their ancestors over. I've never heard it before. Or to laugh at it. That's insane. That just shows me how insane we are. And I'm saying that, look at this, understand me. I'm talking about the insanity of being misplaced, dislocated, out of sync with our own history.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to the show, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. This is part two of a two-part discussion that I'm having and introducing people to a particular part this is Black History Month. I thought this would be an interesting topic. I did a show on this many years ago on this language system that we call Ebonics. This is part two of that. And I'm sure you all heard Dr. Malefi Asante in the video clip before this, I came on to the air. You heard what he had to say about Ebonics, about the vocabulary, about the fact that we do speak two languages. It's a longer lecture. And I first saw that lecture, believe it or not, back in the 90s. Okay, so this is nothing new to me. Okay, but I'm sure it's new to you in the way it is being presented. Okay, like I said in the first show, part one of this two-part series, another great scholar, another Harvard-trained scholar, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, say that we have a dual consciousness. He wrote that in his, I think, 1907 book, Souls of Black Folks. He's a social psychologist. And he said that we have a dual consciousness as people of African descent because we have to walk through this white system as enslaved people, as segregated people, as people affected by racism. We have to, but also as human beings who are kidnapped and human trafficked 400 years ago, and for 400 years been disparaged, not only about how we think, but also about how we speak. But we speak in a language that people don't realize showed the brilliance of us as a people. Okay, it did not have a name, other than the disparaging name given by those who wanted to maintain the illusion that we were illiterate, dumb, stupid, because that's why we are enslaved, because, you know, the Europeans were civilized and they brought us from the deep, darkest Africa to civilize us, which is nonsense. Because as we all know, that our earliest human beings came from Africa, the earliest civilizations came out of Africa, the earliest language systems came out of Africa, religious systems came out of Africa, all kinds of great empires came out of Africa, including Kemet, or Egypt, as we call it today. So no, but that's the mentality to justify enslavement that came out of the mean-spirited, that's what I call it, 1700s and 1800s and 1900s, well into the 20th century, okay, to justify what the horrors that were done to other human beings, the oldest representation of humankind. Okay, with all that, I'm focusing on the language. And the person that influenced the term Ebonics was Dr. Robert L. Williams, who in 1973, on January 26, 1973, there was a conference, the Cognitive and Language Development of Black Children. That was the purpose of it, because the way our language and the way our young children were being disparaged, even to this day, by how they spoke for hundreds of years, they were told that somehow something was wrong with them because they didn't pronounce words the way the standard English speakers are supposed to speak. Not knowing or not caring to know that because of our isolations and enslavement, we brought with us our own language system. Not only did we have to communicate with each other because we came from various different parts of a 3,000 square mile area that go from Mauritania all the way down to the Congo or Angola, with hundreds and hundreds of different language systems that we brought with us on those horrible enslaving ship. But we also have a Western African language structure that we use, because that's where we understood as children, when we were still young adults that were brought over here, and then we were forced to speak this Germanic language, which has a totally different syntax called English. But we use the vocabulary, but people don't recognize until Dr. Lorenzo Dow Turner and other great scholars, and Dr. Robert Williams in 1973, Dr. Lorenzo Dow Turner, who influenced Dr. Williams and other great linguists later on, who was the first to come up with understanding that these people, he was using the Gullah Geechee language that he found when he was doing his research. Lorenzo Dow Turner was first taught at Howard. He was Harvard-trained linguist. He was also taught at Fisk University. So these great black scholars went against what was being told, just like Dr. Carter G. Woodson, W.E.B. Du Bois, great, brilliant black men, well-educated men who did not accept the dialogue or the narrative that was being said about our people, which was always to justify what they did to us as enslaved. Had nothing to do with the reality of who we are as human beings, but that's what they wanted to do as enslavement. So I'm gonna start off where I left off. And this is the book here that I'm basing it on. This was the book that Dr. Lorenzo Dow Turner wrote after 20 years of research from around the 1929 all the way through the 1930s this was published in 1949. And this is the book, one of the most important books about our language system that influenced great linguistics scholars afterwards. Okay, and this is the great man here, Dr. Lorenzo Dow Turner, all right? Brilliant brother. This was the brother right here. This is the older version of him, okay? Dr. Lorenzo Dow Turner, who wrote this great book that influenced Dr. Williams, who labeled this unique language system that he discovered and wrote about and researched, the African-American language system that we call today Ebonics, okay? It is real language. You, brothers and sisters, speak two languages. When you're home, around your friends, or in your community, whether you're in South Carolina or in New York or wherever, the structure, how your accent and your phonetics is, the language structure that you're using is African, Western African, okay? And not only in America, but throughout our diaspora. When you listen to a Jamaican, when you listen to somebody from Haiti that they call bad English here, or bad Jamaican there, or dumb or stupid, or whatever those derogatory terms are, all those language systems, because just like our dancing and our music, we adapt to the environment that we have. But the structure, the foundation is African. That's what I want you to understand, and that's what Dr. Lorenzo Dow Turner is talking about, and that's what Dr. Molefi is talking about in that video clip. Let's go on to the next. The vocabulary alone, again, this is where people get the mistakes, like Dr. Molefi Asante is saying. We hear English words, but English words is not the whole thing about languages, the structure, the sounds. Vocabulary alone does not define a language. Language is only syntax, okay? How sentences are built, phonology, sounds and the stresses, and the lexicon. what shaped the history, our own type of way of speaking, our own worldview, what words we want to emphasize. All that goes into a language system. And we bring with us African language systems from that continent. Hundreds of years later, we're still speaking that, even though you're hearing English words. Let's go on to the next. Just as English can be filled with Latin words, just like Dr. Malefica Sante said in that video clip, and French words, and still be classified structurally as a Germanic language, Gullah and African American English can use English vocabulary while remaining structurally African in many respects. That's what I'm trying to let you know. So when you hear, I be tired, or Jesus, you're speaking African, okay? The phonetic, Jesus, stretching out, because many West African language systems along the coast of Africa today have elongated phonetics, okay? So you are speaking a different language structure, even though you're hearing English words or French words or Spanish or Portuguese words throughout the diaspora. Okay, let's go on to the next. Modern speech technology and natural language processing often train on standard American or British English and treats African American English and Gullah-like varieties as noise errors or off target. What that means is we are familiar with the AI coming out now, right? When you speak in certain things, what he's saying here, what is being said here is that it is programmed to just recognize American standard English, European English, British English, but it's not taught to understand our way of speaking, the African kind, the Ebonic type of speaking. So we're still being racialized even when it comes to the future in which we will be using more and more of the AI type, because they're not being programmed to even recognize how we pronounce and because these language systems are still not recognized, even though we've had over nearly 100 years of research showing that we people of African descent speak at least 2 different languages, and that Ebonics language, which we use every day when we're home or around our family, or we are using Ebonics, and we should be proud of that and do more research on it on our own. Let's go on to the next. Turner demonstrated that the Gullah has its own systematic phonology, syntax, and lexicon. And that's not only the Gullah, but throughout our diaspora. That's what I'm trying to say. Meaning that any robotic or AI system that wants to interact fairly and accurately with black communities must recognize these varieties as rule-governed language, not as defective English. Okay? That's a problem for you future linguistics or people who love languages in the black community. That might be something you want to look into to make sure that our way of speaking is not ignored in future generations into the 21st century. Let's go on to the next. Enslaved Africans on the Sea Islands, which include the Gullah people, brought dozens of West African languages into a plantation hell where they had to communicate with each other and with English-speaking enslavers, okay? So we had all these languages. There was over 200 different ethnic groups, but many of these ethnic groups spoke multiple languages. You hear that? How many? You go to Nigeria. How many languages there is in Nigeria, or in Ghana, or all these other parts of Western Africa where there's multiple ethnic groups and people speak 4 or 5 different languages today. Same thing with our ancestors. We are connected, folks. All right? 400 years did not change anything. You're still African in your foundational way of thinking and speaking, but you just don't know who you are. Let's go on to the next one. Under whippings, sale, and family separation, this is what we had to deal with. They engineered a new code that allowed survival, solidarity, and secrecy. Again, he's just using the Gullah, but we did that throughout the diaspora, throughout the colonies, throughout the plantations. We had our language is nothing but a regularized code spoken by a community of people. That's all language is. And one language is not better than another. It's just a regularized code. but we have been disparaged to maintain this hierarchical view of European type of language systems being better to justify the savagery, not only of us or native people, anybody other than European. This is the sin still of America and all throughout Europe. Let's go on to the next. Turner gave you a scientific foundation to argue that black speech patterns represent design intelligence, a creative creolization, and I don't like that word creolization, but under duress, not a deficit. Therefore, AI and robotics must be trained to respect and model these patterns rather than erase them. Because that's what's happening with our language system, the second language system of Ebonics that we have. It's not because the robot is doing it, it's because the same people who do not understand our history or do not really care about our history are not even thinking about how these robotics and AI are going to be interpreting our language system. A language is how you connect to your ancestors, the books that you read, the folklore that you tell. It connects you to the past, and it also connects future generations to us and the messages we want to send to those who are yet unborn, okay? And we have to connect to those who came before us and learn the techniques that they use to survive a system of white supremacy. Let's go on to the next. In 1929, a black professor, he hears Gullah and refused to hear broken English. That's Lorenzo Dow Turner. He hears a mystery and spent about 20 years decoding it across South Carolina, Georgia. He went to London, Sierra Leone, Brazil, Louisiana. This brother traced these languages. He took a little tape recorder or whatever the version of it back in the 1920s and 30s. That's why this book, and he developed this book right here. Let's go on to the next. For centuries, and the reason he did this is because for centuries the United States needed a caricature of the stupid black speaker to justify slavery, segregation, and educational neglect. Because why buy books for these dumb people, okay? It all ties in to how the horrors of racism that's established. You see, racism is not a feeling. When you say black people cannot be racist, all we could be is reactionary. Okay, we react to the fire that racism is. Racism is the fire that was established by white supremacy. And all we've been doing for the last hundreds of 400 years have been reacting to it. Our heroes that come out of our history, they did not do things to be oppressors. They do things to stop being oppressed. Those were our heroes, our black heroes that we talk about during Black History Month, okay? It's always reacting to the fire that is racism, that is trying to we're not trying to crush America, we're trying to not to be crushed by America. That's where our heroes come out at top in the system. Let's go on to the next. Turner's evidence showed that what was branded ignorance is actually a record of forced bilingualism and creolism, a linguistic monument to black adaptability. We're brilliant. Everywhere we go, we adapt and we enhance. Okay, look at all the inventions under duress. Look at all the sports when we participate in. We bring out the best in us and invest in that environment. So let's go on to the next. Let's continue with this thing. When people mock black speech today, they are mocking a survival technology created under torture and forced migration. That's where Ebonics come from. You had to be brilliant in order to be able to do and create a regularized code. We even had codes in our spiritual songs. When, in our music, in the way we dance, we are a brilliant people. We are an ancient people. And this thing about us being dumb and not actually bringing about anything that we were told, that had been told to us, during the 1800s, during the 1700s, the 1900s, 20th century. And today they're trying to take black history books off the shelf even right now, okay? Dealing with what we're hearing about, with the MAGA movement. It's constantly trying to eliminate these truths about who you are, folks. Let's go on to the next. And now in the 21st century, as I was saying, we are building machines that repeat the same insult, treating black ways of speaking as errors instead of language. Like I was talking about AIs. Let's go on. Enslaved Africans from many West and Central African cultures, Akan, Mandi, Geb, Bantu, and others, Wolof, are forced into the rice and cotton plantations of South Carolina and Georgia. Let's go on to the next. Enslaved Africans from many of the West African cultures, like I said, they arrived with multiple languages but faced a single violent demand: speak English, to obey, to survive, to be controlled. Okay? Let's go on to the next. This was a design decision under duress. Keep African rhythms and grammar, borrow English words, create communication, community, and secrecy in one move. This is what Ebonics, this is the lexicon of Ebonics. That's what I mean by a lexicon. This history, why we created this. Okay, what does it mean to us when we speak a certain way? What's the nuances of it? You could understand, like Dr. Malefio Santos said in the video clip, he knows a bunch of vocabulary, but he doesn't know how to speak the language of French, okay? You have to understand the syntax, the structure. You got to understand also this, the language, the history that brought that language out. And so our language, Ebonics, is developed no different than any other language system that been created in Europe or in Asia or other parts of the world. We created a language system here. And Ebonics is a legitimate language system. Again, you as people of African descent here in America speak at least 2 languages, even though you might be hearing English words, but the structure and the syntax makes it, that came out of the experience of our ancestors from Africa. Let's go on to the next. As Dr. Lorenzo Dow Turner showed in this book, Gullah was not an accident. It was a black algorithm. Takes African syntax, add English lexicon, output survival through the secrecy. We communicate with each other so that the slave owners did not understand what we were saying. So what if they thought it was dumb language? We understood what we were saying. We communicated. When we wanted to help somebody escape, we knew the language, okay? Let's go on to the next one, then I'll just stop right there, okay? Again, Dr. Lorenzo Dow Turner mapped hundreds of Gullah words to West African sources, terms for people, food, religion, kinship, showed that the Gullah phonology sound echoes African languages more than standard English, demonstrated that Gullah grammar, tense, aspects of the sentences cannot be explained as lazy English, but as a Creole with an African substrate. And I'm gonna stop it right here. In other words, know who you are, know thyself. And until next time, I hope I helped you understand a little better. Peace, Hotep, bye-bye.